term limited from office in 2010. He's got an A rating from the National Rifle Association, 98% rating from the Florida Chamber of Commerce, and is a winner of the Christian Coalition of Florida's Faith and Family Award. He's got strong, principled, conservative leadership that's in the House that has made him a natural to lead key fights for eliminating property taxes and protecting employee rights to secret ballots in the workplace. He's been big on reducing government spending, and it's no surprise that he's been popular with some Tea Party audiences. Running for Senate now, I give you Adam Hasner.
Well, good evening, Boca Raton. It's great to be home with you. I am going to do this. We're going to turn out the light, just like we're going to do on the Obama administration in November 2012. Now, as Alex mentioned, this is a statewide campaign for United States Senate, but I have to tell you, today is a special day being here in Boca Raton because it means one thing. I'm going to get to sleep in my own bed tonight. Florida is a big state, and so it is great to be home. It is great to be among so many friends and familiar faces, people who I had the privilege and honor of serving as a member of the Florida legislature for 8 years, and truly it was a tremendous opportunity. And so I say thank you to those of you who have been supportive of me in the past, and to those of you who are here tonight for the first time, or whether you are somebody who has been alive with the Tea Party since its first formation. I want to applaud you, because one of the questions that I invariably get everywhere I go around the state of Florida is, how is it possible to be a pro-life, pro-gun conservative from Palm Beach County? It's kind of like fighting behind enemy lines, if you know what I mean. And so being out here, especially out in West Boca, I can tell you, this is a great crowd. I am enthused because one thing I know for sure, in 2010, we sent the first wave of limited government leaders to Washington. In 2012, we're going to send reinforcements to get the job done. And I know things are going well. My father and his wife live out in West Delray in a similar gated community. I know things are going well because I just had the opportunity to visit there recently. And a few people came up to me that have never come up to me before. And they whispered, and they said, Adam, don't tell anybody. But we support you. And the reason why they're whispering is because they still want to be invited to all the good parties. But this is a critical time in our nation's history. This is a critical time in our nation's history. And I think what we see every single day, whether it has been what is going on with our deficit and our national debt, whether it has been watching America deteriorate on the global stage, whether it is watching our moral values and the family continue to break down. These are the things that are happening. But I will tell you this, I am inspired now more than I ever have been, because I'm getting to travel the state of Florida. I'm getting to meet people like those of you here in this room tonight. I'm getting to hear the stories about the people with hope, the people who are ready to fight, the people who are willing to do the tough things in order to make sure that America rebounds and gets headed back in the right direction. This is that time, and you think back over the history and the course of American history, and you realize this is just another one of those generational moments when we need to band together to rise to the challenges like those before us rose to theirs. This is that time. And so as I've been traveling the state and having the opportunity to meet with so many people and hear their stories, there has been one particular group that I have to tell you that has really touched my heart, that has really made me wake up every single day with the passion and the energy and the determination to go out and say the tough things that need to be said, even if they're not popular. Those are people who I've met who came here from foreign lands. If you think about it, those of us who were born in this country, we won the lottery. We're lucky. It's the people, though, who came to America, who fled Eastern Europe, who fled Russia, who fled communism, who fled from Cuba to the United States and immigrated from other places where they fled from dictatorships. Those are people right now, and there may even be some of you in this room tonight who have relatives who resemble that story. But those are the people right now who are shaking their heads, who are the most distraught of anyone, because they've seen what happens. They've seen how this turns out. They understand what happens when government grows too big. They understand the rules of history. Great societies decline when freedom gives way to dependency. That's what we're fighting right now. We are fighting a three-front ideological battle for the heart and soul of this country. And this is that line in the sand moment. This is that time that we want to be able to look back and say that we answered the call. We have some younger generations in this room too. So we're spanning from young to old in this room. Everyone here understands it. But what we've seen in America, and more recently, is we've watched as the deterioration of the family, the breakdown in America's culture, has led to this over-reliance on government. It's created the dependency society in America. It's led to the taxes and the spending and the borrowing that's been required to sustain it. And those dollars continue to pile up and mount up to astronomical deficits, and now a $14+ trillion national debt, which I would tell you jeopardizes our nation's very own sovereignty and has also become America's greatest national security threat. This is a time for us to send a message. This is a time for us, all of us gathered here in rooms like this, all across the state of Florida and all across the country. Because the window of opportunity is narrowing. We are headed in the wrong direction. Barack Obama was not kidding around when he told us during the 2008 presidential campaign that he wanted to transform America. The problem is that he's transforming it into something that is unrecognizable to us, to those of us who believe in limited government principles, to those of us who believe in the spirit of the individual, not the power of the state. And so that's why we need to fight. You know, one thing I've learned too as I've traveled the state of Florida is that Floridians aren't looking for Republicans and Democrats to simply split the difference. They're looking for leadership. And it's not enough. It is not enough simply to oppose bad policies. I can tell you this, with the Obama administration, there are enough bad policies for us to continue to oppose. But we need to lay out our vision for the future. Now, I know just recently President Obama was interviewed, and he made a claim that I think all of us would agree with. No one's better off today than they were 4 years ago. We all remember that from the 1980 presidential election. But I think the more important question, the question that I hope you will join me in asking every day between now and next November, is where do we want America to be 5 years from now? We have to have a plan for reining in the size and the scope of government, for cutting federal spending and balancing the federal budget. I was the first candidate in the country to sign the Cut, Cap, and Balance Pledge. Now, I know it's already out of the news and people have forgotten about it, but just think about how simple that plan was. Cutting spending, capping future federal spending, and passing a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution. And what did the Republicans do? We tossed it overboard. And for what? A plan that's going to add $10 trillion more to the national debt over the next decade? And that sets up this not-so-super committee that is beginning to meet, that is going to result in either increased taxes or significant spending cuts for our military and our defense. We need real leadership in Washington, D.C. It's about putting a plan together that says we are going to do the tough things in the short term, and we're also going to do the difficult things in the long term. What I mean by that is we have to go out and talk about what is necessary in order to preserve and reform Social Security and save Medicare and have a new modern system that is sustainable going forward in the future. Now, a lot of people, especially in this room, you're going to see a lot of advertisements. You're going to hear a lot of messages that are going to try to scare you. That are going to say, don't vote Republican because they're going to try to take away your Social Security. or your Medicare. I have news for you, and I think each and every one of you know it. Those programs are on a path to insolvency. And if we don't do something about it, those programs are going to collapse on current beneficiaries, and they are going to burden future generations with crushing taxes and a lower standard and quality of living. People ask me all the time, Adam, how is it possible that you can campaign for United States Senate talking about, here in Florida, talking about reforming Social Security and Medicare? And it's very easy. I'm not afraid of losing an election. I'm afraid of losing our country. And if we don't do something to save Medicare for those currently receiving benefits or those nearing eligibility and having a new system for future generations, we are going to watch America's debt continue to skyrocket to higher levels than it currently is, and that is going to stifle economic growth. But remember this, our vision for the future can't just be about cutting. We do need to do all the things to rein in the size and scope of government, but we also have to have a vision and a roadmap for growth in this country. And that's something that I haven't seen yet coming out of Washington. What is our plan? I've been out there talking about the things that we need to do in order to overhaul our tax system. Have a flatter, fairer, simpler system. Get rid of all of these regulations that are killing job creators. We have to have regulatory certainty so that business owners, so that companies can make the investments, so that they can go out there and hire employees. We need to have a domestic energy policy in this country so that we can drill for more onshore and offshore oil and natural gas so we are no longer dependent on foreign sources. These are not difficult things for us to be for. But like I said before, people aren't looking for Republicans and Democrats to split the difference. We know that Washington is broken. And the same old compromises and consensus aren't going to fix it. That's why this election year is so critically important. Because Bill Nelson has been the biggest cheerleader for the Obama administration agenda. Supporting him 98% of the time on policies like Obamacare and stimulus and card check and cap and trade and the debt ceiling. All of these job-killing policies that are piling more and more debt on future generations, that are infringing upon our freedoms, and that are making our country less safe and less secure. Think about it from this perspective. Because I hear all the time as I travel, a lot of people say, well, Bill Nelson, he's not really that bad of a guy. Maybe he isn't personally. But for every vote that Marco Rubio takes in the United States Senate, Bill Nelson's vote cancels it out. That's why November 2012 is so critical for us to make Barack Obama a one-term president and to take back the majority of the United States Senate. Because I believe now more than ever that we can rise to this generational challenge. That we can reignite America's economic prosperity based on proven principles. That we can restore a national security platform based on peace through strength. So our allies know that we stand with them, like the State of Israel, and our enemies know that we oppose them. We have witnessed the moral relevancy of the Obama administration and what it has done to weaken America on the global stage. I think this is a critical time, but I think there's one last thought that each and every one of you would agree with, and that is this. It's not just about electing any Republican to Washington. It's about electing the right Republican. Because one thing we know for sure is that the problems that we face today weren't just created by Democrats. Republicans share in the blame. And what we need now more than ever are leaders in Washington, D.C. who have the courage to say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done regardless of political consequences. We need people who are concerned with what are the consequences to our country if we fail to take action. As I mentioned before, I had the tremendous opportunity to serve in the state legislature for 8 years. It was during that time when Marco Rubio was the Speaker of the House in 2007. And he selected me to serve as his Republican Majority Leader. And together we were fighting for a conservative reform agenda in Tallahassee. Now in politics, people have short memories. People forget that after the 2006 whipping that we took, or thumping I think is what Rahm Emanuel called it, but after the 2006 elections, it was the establishment of the Republican Party that was saying the best thing for Republicans to do is be more like Democrats. I didn't buy into that. I was the one saying, even back then, Republicans don't need to be less partisan. Republicans need to be more principled. And I think that's what we need now more in Washington than ever before. Now, I will tell you, when it came to these tough issues in Tallahassee, many of you remember that Charlie Crist was advancing center-left policies and doing more of the types of things that were more akin to Arnold Schwarzenegger. I was the one standing up, fighting against it. We fought against $500 million in unemployment stimulus and rejected unemployment stimulus that Charlie Crist was trying to accept. We rejected Charlie Crist's plan to block offshore drilling off of the coast of Florida, and we shredded his plans for a cap-and-trade agreement. These weren't things that were easy. These were things that weren't politically popular, and I know there are also some folks in this room who remember. Many of you know of an organization called CARE, Council of American Islamic Relations. Back in 2007, before many of us in this room even knew what it was, I was standing up to them. People were saying, Adam, you're being a racist, you're being an Islamophobe, you're being a bigot. And I was saying, no, CARE is a terrorist front group that is funding Hamas. I was in Tallahassee showing obsession, radical Islam's war against the West, and being ridiculed by these groups. So I can tell you, I've proven myself. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to stand firm in the face of opposition and criticism. I've proven myself to stand up not only to the Democrats, but to Republicans who act like them. And because of so many of the people in this room and your help and your support, I've proven that I can win elections in the bluest part of the state of Florida without compromising on my principles. That's what it's going to take. That's what it's going to take to beat Bill Nelson. Because as much as I want to believe it, you cannot win a statewide election in Florida with Republican votes alone. That's why this is so critical, that we are able to go out and articulate our message so that independent voters, and yes, I met even a few Democrats in the room tonight, so that you're going to come along with us because you're more concerned about the future of this country than you are about a political party. So this is the time in the state's history and in our country's history when I think we need to fight. When I think it is critical for us to do the tough things. And so I'm asking for your support. I have been so honored and so privileged to have so much support and momentum. You heard earlier that we won the CPAC straw poll in Orlando last weekend. We're very proud of that. I'm proud of the endorsements that we've earned from some of the largest grassroots organizations that share these principles throughout the country. Groups like FreedomWorks and Concerned Women for America and the Family Research Council. And I'm proud to have endorsements from conservative icons like Mark Levin and Eric Erickson from RedState.com. And one of the endorsements I'm most proud of right here in our own backyard is to have the support and the endorsement of our very own Joyce Kaufman. So I'd ask you to join our movement. I'd ask you to be a part of it. Go to our website. Sign up for our emails. Make a contribution to our campaign. Because this is a critical fight for the future of our country. And so before I conclude, I just want to take the time. I don't know where Pam went, but I want to thank Pam and so many others of the leadership of the Tea Party who have helped to continue to build this movement. I remember back in 2009, on April 15th, on the steps of the state capitol, when I went to my first Tea Party rally. And that was back when Nancy Pelosi and everyone, they were calling it AstroTurf. They were saying that this movement was just a flash in the pan. I've got news for Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid and all the others. This movement is real and this movement is growing. And it's because of people like you. It's because of people like you that said enough is enough. We're going to get up off of the sidelines and we are going to fight to preserve the greatness of this country. And that's why I'm running for United States Senate. Because I didn't want to sit on the sidelines and watch America continue to go in a direction that I would be embarrassed about, that we would all be embarrassed about. That's why this is such an important time. I want us to be able to say that we answered the call, and I need your help and support to do this. And so I promise you this. If you send me to Washington to challenge the status quo, then together we will save the United States of America. Thank you all so much.
Adam, thank you for coming to our nice hometown reception. We have time for a little bit of Q&A. I don't know if Roger back there has the other microphone. I'm going to need that. Or I can run back and forth. I need the exercise anyway. And if I do that, okay. Does anybody have any questions here for Adam? Q&A?
Adam, you're probably aware the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., federal civil service employees, are paid a pretty good salary compared to those in the private sector. However, that's even less than the UN bureaucrats are getting on the average. And given our budget deficit, I wonder whether you've been functioning lately with anti-Israel, what you would do if you were elected to the Senate to fund, our contribution is much greater than that of any other nation, to either defund the UN or at least substantially reduce that contribution.
Great question. Great question, and let me just share this before I answer, because there was one little inside comment that I wanted to make, because I felt so at home here in Boca Raton that I forgot to maybe share with the rest of the group that doesn't know this about me. But I talked about how important it is to have someone in Washington who's willing to go against the grain. And I forgot to tell you guys, I've been going against the grain my entire life. Many of you know this, but I'm the son of two liberal Jewish Democrats who was born in Brooklyn, New York. So I can tell you that hasn't always been easy. Having said that, let me address the serious question about the United Nations. The United Nations is a corrupt organization, plain and simple. The attempts, or what I would say, the threats to America's sovereignty come from the United Nations, and they also come from those who I believe are part of that same international movement. People like George Soros. I can tell you all this. I have a much different vision for the 21st century, and it doesn't include George Soros. Now, what we've seen, and I was the first person, I believe, I'll just say it this way, I came out very strongly when Hamas and Fatah created a unity government. I was one of the early advocates for eliminating all U.S. aid to the Palestinian Authority. And I think that until we have a new president in the White House who understands moral clarity, that we will not have that type of policy. I do hope that the Republicans in the House and the Republicans in the Senate will continue to fight to eliminate that funding. Congresswoman Ileana Ross-Lehtinen has a great piece of legislation that I think is a great first step in this process, because it also goes to the heart of your question, which is to defund any UN program that does not serve America's national security interests. And I think we need to begin that right away.
Hi, Alan. I think one of the major cancers of this country that I come to find out every day, that more and more people don't realize that the Federal Reserve System is a private corporation, tax-free, that prints money out of thin air. A lot of people didn't know that. Of course, I didn't know it not too long ago either. And if you Google Woodrow Wilson's last words before he died, there's a little controversy on it, but I kind of believe that he said in his last breath, "When I signed the Federal Reserve into power, I committed treason to my country." Where do you stand on the abolishment of the Federal Reserve and the IRS and a flat tax?
I invited this guy. This is Jerry. This is my friend. I knew it was going to be a tough question.
It's a great question because, first, let me just admit that I don't have a PhD in economics.
Neither does Obama.
But what I will tell you is that monetary policy is as important of a component to our nation's fiscal health as fiscal policy is. And what we have seen with the continued printing of money, whether it's QE1, QE2, potentially QE3, what you're seeing is a continued devaluation of America's dollars. There is no more insidious tax than the devaluation of the currency or inflation, for that matter. Now, I do not support at this time the abolishment of the Federal Reserve. What I do support is full and total transparency of the Federal Reserve. And more importantly, as I continue to learn more about this issue, I believe that we do need to move back in the direction toward putting America back on the gold standard.
That's fine.
Now, to your other point from monetary policy to fiscal policy, I think I mentioned it briefly. I believe first and foremost what we need to do is have an overhaul of our tax system. We cannot create jobs in this country if we have a 35% corporate tax rate that is making us non-competitive around the globe. It's sending jobs overseas, and more importantly, what it's doing is it's allowing companies to continue to park assets overseas.
We have trillions of dollars overseas with all of our big corporations just sitting there, but they're not going to come here with these tax codes. The IRS needs to be eliminated and on a flat tax. That's fair for everybody.
Amen. And I couldn't agree with you more.
IRS. No more offshore accounts.
I couldn't agree with you more. And that's why I said earlier, we need to have a tax system that's flatter, fairer, and simpler. And that begins with, I believe, several things. Reducing all of our tax rates to flat levels, whether it's one level or two levels ultimately. Eliminating loopholes, exemptions, and corporate favoritism.
All deductions.
And more importantly, eliminating the death tax, eliminating taxes on capital gains, eliminating taxes on dividends. These are the things that we need to do to create investment, to create jobs here in this country. And this is what I was talking about earlier, about having a plan that we've been talking about, that I think more Republicans need to be talking about for economic growth in our country, because we can't just be the party of cutting. We need to be talking about what we're going to do to create jobs.
Vice versa. Who's next? Okay.
Hi, Adam. What are you going to do about publicizing Agenda 21?
Sorry, I went too quick. That's right. I know you wanted to answer the question. I wanted to answer the question so fast. I think I've mentioned several times. First and foremost, I talked about George Soros. I think George Soros is probably one of the greatest threats in terms of his involvement and his role that he plays with all of these international bodies and all of these international organizations. As a member of the United States Senate, I will never do anything that in any way, shape, or form jeopardizes America's sovereignty. And I can tell you this right now, what is making America weaker on the global stage is our debt, is our fiscal health. And what is happening every single day, and we're seeing it more and more, as we continue to borrow money from countries like China that don't share our values and our interests, our ability to act in our own best interests are limited. And we're seeing it both from an economic perspective, we're seeing it both from a regulatory perspective, and we're seeing it also from a security perspective. And so I think it is critical for us to stand firm for American sovereignty and not support the types of things that are antithetical to and are not aligned with the constitutional principles of the U.S. Constitution. I think that is extremely important for us to understand. We understand that so much of this has already crept into our society. We need to put an end to it, and we need to make sure that we don't do anything that puts international bodies ahead of American law in any way.
We have time for a couple more here.
Hi, you mentioned George Soros a few times. He's a very powerful, wealthy person and a very evil person. How do you, first of all, how do you attempt to neutralize, to get rid of him?
Politically,
right. My first question and my second question is, I know you can't support a candidate, really, but you talk about somebody who can stand up to all these things like you do. As a presidential candidate, of all those that we know of at this time, can you suggest somebody that would do that? I don't know. I don't know.
You need a contract?
We can all make our own individual decisions, that's for sure.
Let me say this about what I've learned in the past, I guess since April of 2009 with the Tea Party movement. And I say that word, or I use that phrase broadly, because I think it encaptures so many other organizations that are out there that are doing important things. I would tell you this. In 2010, this movement saved the Republican Party. In 2012, this movement is the only thing that can potentially save our country. And so when it comes to standing up against those types of forces that are, I believe, waging class warfare, that are undermining America's strength, America's security, I think we need to be more vocal. I think we need to spread the message. I think each and every one of you needs to be able to go out to your friends, to your neighbors, to your coworkers, and get them to an event like this. Get them to a meeting. Get them to start understanding what is happening to this country, and more importantly, especially if they have children and grandchildren, what type of future we're leaving for them if we don't do something in the next few years. And so I think it's not just about one person like George Soros. This is, as I talked about earlier, an ideological battle for the heart and soul of our country, and now is the time to fight. As for president, I'm going to let each and every one of you in this room decide who you want to support for the Republican nomination. But I think we all agree on one thing. Anyone but Obama.
Maybe a couple more here. Senate.
As a pro-life candidate, what do you feel that you can do as a member of Congress to change the current government's approach to abortion and changing Roe versus Wade?
Thank you so much for asking that question. And I think, let me just preface it by saying this. As a member of the United States Senate, I will not support any judges or judicial appointments that do not believe in a strict interpretation of the U.S. Constitution. And as a member of Congress, as a member of the Senate, as it relates to appropriations as well, I believe one of the areas where we can quickly begin to cut spending is by stopping funding for Planned Parenthood and any of those other organizations. I just think, I know, Alex, if I can just expand just real quickly. I know that an issue like abortion sometimes divides a group like this. And I hear a lot, as I travel the state, people saying, stay away from social issues. Stay away from abortion. Stay away from marriage. We just have to agree on these issues. And these are very important issues. But as I said earlier, I think it is so important to understand that it has been the breakdown of our culture, the deterioration of our respect for life in this country, that's led to so many of the economic problems that we have. All of these issues are intertwined and inseparable. If you think about it, our economic prosperity, our national security, our traditional Judeo-Christian values, they're inseparable. So that's why I think it is so important for us to be able to have this conversation, to have this dialogue on all of these issues, and not just only focus on one. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
I think we have time for one more, and then Adam might be able to hang out afterwards to chat with some people for a few minutes. I know he wants to probably get home, but yes, sir.
That's right.
Adam, I certainly hope that you're going to be elected. As a practical matter, there's a rap on the Republican Party, it's a populist rap, is that they support the millionaires and billionaires because they don't want to raise their taxes. But my problem with that is Obama defines it as $200,000 a year. You tell someone from New York, New Jersey, California that they're billionaires earning $200,000 just without getting by. So why doesn't the Republican Party, to eliminate this, just raise the taxes on true millionaires or like Buffett said, on extreme ultra-millionaires and billionaires? I don't see any problem with that. I think they have the extra money. They can spare it. Let's do it. Eliminate that as a wrap.
Keep lowering it.
This is the best part of the. This is the best part of the program, because this is when I get to disagree with somebody in the audience. But the reality is this: is that raising taxes, you could raise taxes 100% on all of the people that you alluded to, and you wouldn't even come close to addressing the fiscal challenges that we're facing. But here's how you eliminate the argument: you get on offense. And you stop being on defense like Republicans are always on. And you talk about the fact that this is class warfare that this administration and the Democrats in Congress are waging. And what we need to be able to do is go out and talk about why reducing taxes, why cutting spending are going to be the policies that create jobs. If we allow the Democrats to define the debate, we're going to lose. And I'll use this example. I talked about cut, cap, and balance briefly earlier. But if everybody remembers this, the minute the Republicans came out of the gate, we were using the language of the Democrats, agreeing to the fact that if we don't do something, America was going to default. We used their language, and they backed us into a corner, and we were forced to accept a compromise. And I think it's the same thing on taxes. We cannot allow the Democrats to define the narrative. We need to be able to go out and talk about why tax cuts, a streamlined tax system, is what's best for economic growth in our country. And if we're on offense, we're not sitting back and listening to the class warfare rhetoric of tax millionaires and billionaires and eliminate subsidies for oil companies and for corporate jet owners and those types of things. That's what they want Republicans to do. They want us to break just a little bit, and just a little bit more, and then just a little bit more. And it goes back to what I said earlier, which is that this is not about splitting the difference. This is the time to fight. This is that line in the sand moment. And so that's why, as a candidate for United States Senate, I may say some things that are not going to be politically popular. Most of you know I'm not a politically correct candidate. But I'm going to say things that I truly believe are in the best interest of the future of this country. And it's like I said earlier, we can't be afraid about losing elections. We need to be concerned with the future of this country. That's why this is such an important time. That's why I'm spending 6, 7 days a week traveling around the state, having the opportunity to meet with groups like this, to listen, to be able to have that conversation, and hopefully to be able to earn your support so that we can do the things that are necessary to put America back on the right track. Thank you all so much. Have a great night.
Adam Hasner. Round of applause. Thanks for coming out for us. Before everyone takes off, let me ask you a quick question. How many of you, by show of hands, is this your first Tea Party event? Please raise your hand. Okay. Please.